My name is Ainsley Morgan, I'm 32 years old, and I was never supposed to walk through the doors of my own beach house that weekend. Yet, there I stood, sun hat in hand, sandals brushing against the warm hardwood floor, watching my parents' faces go pale as they realized the stranger's house they had rented for the Morgan family reunion was mine. I hadn't been invited. Course not. I hadn't received so much as a birthday text in almost 12 years. But that didn't stop them from parading into my property like they owned it, like I was the one who'd vanished from their lives, instead of the other way around. Let me take you back, because if I don't start at the beginning, none of this will make sense. Drop a comment letting me know. Have you ever been cut off by your family, and then found yourself doing better than they ever imagined? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to build yourself from the ground up with no one clapping for you. Because that's exactly what I had to do. I grew up in Beaufort, South Carolina, the middle child in the kind of Southern family that had matching monogram pajamas and a framed family mission statement above the fireplace. My father, William Morgan, was the kind of man who shook your hand too tightly and smiled like a politician. My mother, Lydia, was grace and judgment wrapped in pearls and pastel cashmere. My older brother, Preston, was the heir, the legacy kid who did everything right. Duke undergrad, Harvard Law, married to a blue blood family friend named Elizabeth. And my younger sister, Savannah, cheer captain, debutante, two-time Carolina Belle, married into old Charleston money before she could legally rent a car. Then there was me, the artist, the misfit, the dreamer with paint under her nails and no interest in society luncheons. From as young as 6, I knew I didn't fit. While Savannah practiced pageant walks in the backyard, I'd be sitting under the magnolia tree sketching its branches. I wasn't rebellious. Not at first. I just wanted different things. When I told them I'd gotten into Rhode Island School of Design, the top art school in the country, they didn't congratulate me. My dad poured himself bourbon. My mom asked, "But what would you do with that?" They offered me a compromise. A finance degree at Vanderbilt, paid in full, with an internship at one of Dad's real estate firms. I turned them down. I remember my mother staring at me across the dinner table, like I'd just announced I'd joined a cult. "We raised you better than this," she said. No, I wanted to reply. "You raised me safe. You raised me quiet." I didn't say that. I just packed a duffel bag, took what little money I had from summer jobs and left. They didn't stop me. They didn't even call when I got there. Those first few years in Providence were brutal. I was working 3 jobs, gallery assistant, waitress, dog walker, just to keep up with rent and tuition. I painted at night, in a tiny room lit by Christmas lights strung along the walls, praying my cheap space heater wouldn't blow a fuse. My work was good, but that didn't pay the bills. I sold my first piece at a coffee shop for $100. I remember holding that check in my hands like it was a golden ticket. Then came commissions. A local restaurant wanted a mural. A boutique wanted seasonal window paintings. Bit by bit I started to survive. And eventually I started to live. By 26 I had my own studio. By 28 I was hosting sold-out shows in Manhattan. At 30, I got featured in Architectural Digest for a series of hand-painted installations inside luxury homes across the East Coast. And that's how I met Clara Weston. She was 65, retired, impossibly elegant. She'd inherited her husband's real estate empire, but she had a bohemian streak that people didn't expect from a woman in pearls. She hired me to transform a beach house she owned in Montauk. Not just decorate it, turn it into a story. We became unlikely friends. I was the daughter she never had. She was the mother I didn't realize I needed. One spring afternoon, Clara sat me down on the back deck, looking out over the sea. "This house doesn't belong to me anymore," she said. "I want you to have it." I laughed. But she wasn't joking. She passed away 6 months later. Her lawyer handed me the deed in a plain white envelope. Inside was a note in her script. "You saw the soul of this place. Make it yours. Make it mean something." And I did. I turned that Montauk beach house into more than a home. It became a private gallery, studio, A rental property during the off-season that funded my projects and gave young artists scholarships. My life, once a patchwork of broken hopes, was now art in itself. I didn't think about my family much. Not anymore. Not until that day, 3 weeks before summer, when my assistant forwarded me a rental request. A group calling themselves the Morgan family had booked my house for a week, paid in full, through a third-party luxury listing service. The guests, William, Lydia, Preston, Savannah, and spouses, every single one of them, except me. I stared at the confirmation email for a long time. They were hosting a family reunion in my house, and they didn't even realize it. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. Had options. I could cancel the booking, no explanation, or I could leave town, avoid them. But I chose neither. Instead, I stayed and waited. I didn't sleep the night before they arrived. Tried. I really did. I lit my ocean-scented candle, played the calming jazz playlist I usually used while painting, but my mind was already spiraling. What would they say? Would they recognize the art on the walls? Would they pause in the foyer and feel something familiar in the air? The scent of eucalyptus, the faint clove from my candle drawer? Would they notice the black and white portrait of a faceless woman I painted the day I signed my first gallery contract? Would they realize it was me? That morning I wore linen. Simple, elegant, like a summer breeze disguised as a person. I didn't want to look wealthy. I didn't want to look vengeful. I wanted to look like someone unbothered, someone unbreakable. Their check-in was scheduled for 1 p.m. sharp. I heard the first car before I saw it, tires crunching softly on the gravel driveway. I stood in the hallway, just behind the staircase, where they wouldn't see me until they stepped fully inside. The door opened, and there they were, my parents, my siblings, their picture-perfect families, all stepping into my home with the entitlement of royalty arriving at a summer estate. My father was first. William Morgan. Same salt and pepper hair, same pressed collar, same eyes that used to squint at me when I spoke of dreams instead of plans. He stepped in with a critical gaze, as if inspecting the layout for imperfections. My mother followed, a pink chiffon scarf knotted at her throat, her fingers wrapped tightly around a structured designer tote. Behind them came Preston, my brother, and his wife Elizabeth, whispering something to their 2 young boys. Then Savannah, trailing behind with her husband, Ryan, and their 3 blonde daughters. Like a magazine ad come to life. No one noticed me. Not at first. They were too busy admiring the high ceilings, the wraparound windows, the ocean air sweeping in through the French doors. Then my father turned toward the hallway and froze. His lips parted slightly, like he was about to greet a stranger. My mother's mouth opened too. She blinked rapidly. I smiled gently. "Hello," I said. Silence. You could have heard a seashell drop. Savannah was the first to speak. What are you doing here?" I didn't answer her. I just turned my gaze back to my father. I believe the better question is, what are you all doing in my house? My mother's fingers went limp, her tote sliding from her hand and landing on the floor with a dull thud. She didn't even blink. "You own this place," she whispered, as if saying it louder would make it less real. "Yes," I said, letting the word settle like sea mist over the floorboards. "It was left to me 3 years ago. I live here. I work here. And for some reason, your rental company decided not to tell you who the owner was." Savannah's face flushed red. "This is a mistake. This has to be a..." "No," I said. "There's no mistake. You booked my house. For your reunion. One I wasn't invited to. Just like the last 11 Christmases, 8 weddings, 3 new babies, and Grandma Lou's funeral." My voice didn't crack. I practiced too many times in my head for it to. Preston stepped forward, holding one of his sons gently by the shoulder. "We didn't know, Ainsley." "You didn't ask," I said simply. There was again silence. But this time, it buzzed like a hive of unseen bees. The kind of silence that follows a revelation no one wants to sit with. I thought you were living in a studio apartment somewhere, my mother finally said. Last we heard, you were struggling. I was, I replied, not shrinking from the truth. But struggle isn't the end. Sometimes it's just the start of something better. She flinched just barely. My father cleared his throat. Well, this is awkward. That was all he could say. After 12 years. Is it? I asked, smiling tightly. To me, this feels like closure. They asked if they should leave. I told them they didn't have to. That the house was paid for. That I'd booked a room at a friend's gallery loft in East Hampton just in case. I'd be gone in an hour. But I didn't leave. Not yet, matey. I sat in the living room, my living room, and listened as they wandered the house, whispering like ghosts in a place they thought was haunted by someone else. My mother stood at the gallery wall I'd curated myself. 14 pieces, each hand-painted over the last 10 years, each capturing a different moment of pain, grief, and rising. She paused at one in particular, a painting of a girl on the edge of a dock, arms wide to the sea, her shadow long and lonely. She said nothing, but I watched her chest rise and fall differently, like she finally understood that the girl in the painting wasn't some anonymous muse. It was me. That night I stayed in the guest house. It was far enough from the main building that I didn't have to hear their laughter or their stories. I didn't want to hear my name brought up like an awkward side note. But part of me wanted to believe just maybe they were finally seeing me. The next morning I walked down to the beach with a sketchpad tucked under my arm. Tide was low. The light hit the water like melted gold. I saw someone else down there. My niece, Preston's youngest. Maybe 6 or 7, holding a seashell and staring at it like it held a universe. She looked up and saw me. Are you the painter lady? Smiled. I am. You painted the picture in the hallway, didn't you? I did. She looked at the shell in her hand, then back at me. I think it looks like that picture. And just like that, the walls around my heart cracked just a little. Later that afternoon, my brother found me by the guest house. He stood at the open door like he didn't know whether to walk in or apologize first. I looked up your name, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. You're kind of a big deal. Shrugged. Only in very small circles. You did all this. He nodded. He looked down, then back at me. I wish I'd checked in more. I didn't know how to explain it to them. You didn't need to explain, I said. You just needed to care. He nodded slowly, shame written across every line of his face. I'm sorry. I know. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The rest of the week passed like a quiet play. My family tried to act normal. Barbecues, beach photos, sunset walks, but there was always an undercurrent. An awareness. A new weight to the air. On the final night, they invited me to dinner. All of them. It was the first time in 12 years that we sat around the same table. Savannah apologized in her own way, commenting on my interior design, complimenting the menu I'd recommended. Small gestures. But I noticed. Even my mother raised a glass and said, "To family. However long the road may be back to it." I didn't toast. But I didn't walk away either. That night, I returned to the main house. Alone. Everyone had left the next morning. I walked through the empty rooms, touched the armrest of the couch where my father sat, ran my fingers across the doorknob my niece had struggled with, stopped at the painting where my mother had lingered. For once, the silence didn't sting. Simply, maybe reconciliation isn't loud. Maybe it doesn't come in grand speeches or tearful hugs. Maybe it's a daughter opening her doors. Maybe it's a family finally seeing what they tried to forget. And maybe that's enough. It was a gray morning when my parents asked to speak with me. The air was thick with ocean mist, the kind that softened every edge of the beach house view, turning the horizon into a watercolor blur. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring a cup of dark roast into a ceramic mug I'd made myself years ago. It still had the faint thumbprint from when I pressed the clay into shape. I heard my mother before I saw her. "Do you have a minute, Ainsley?" She said my name the way someone steps around broken glass, carefully like it still held the power to cut. I turned around to find both of them, William and Lydia Morgan, standing side by side in my kitchen, looking like they'd aged 10 years in 2 days. The reunion was over. The cousins had packed up, the siblings had driven off, and the house was finally quiet again. Except for them. Except for this. Sure, I said, sliding a second mug across the counter. Coffee. My mother nodded silently. My father hesitated, then took the cup. That alone told me how deeply uncomfortable they were. William Morgan never accepted help from anyone he couldn't outrank. We sat at the kitchen island. Not the formal dining table. Not the parlor where they'd hosted family game night earlier in the week. Here, in the part of the house where I created things. Here where I lived. This was my ground. There was a long silence. I didn't fill it. I'd learned over the years that some silences were worth keeping, if only to watch who broke them. It was my father who spoke first. This place is beautiful. Every detail. He gestured vaguely at the exposed beams and floor-to-ceiling windows. It feels like you. I gave a small nod. That was the point. More silence. My mother sipped the coffee slowly, like she was stalling for time. Finally she set the mug down. We didn't know, she said softly. You didn't want to know, I replied, not unkindly. You never asked. Not once. She flinched. My father looked down at the swirling black coffee in his cup, like it might give him an excuse to avoid eye contact. You have every right to be angry, she continued. We thought we were doing the right thing. Back then. I let that sit for a moment. You mean when you cut me off? When I was 20 and scared and chasing something you didn't understand? You were choosing a path that didn't align with our values, my father said, his voice more composed. You rejected our support. Our plan for you. I laughed, but not with humor. I rejected control. There's a difference. I remember sitting at that graduation dinner, I continued, the memories crawling out now that the door had opened. When I told you I was going to pursue art full-time. Do you remember what you said to me, Dad? He hesitated. You said, if you walk away from the life we prepared for you, you're walking away from this family. My mother's eyes shimmered. My father looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. That wasn't fair, my mother said quietly. We thought you were throwing everything away. I wasn't, I said. I was trying to build something. Something of my own. I didn't want to become Savannah or Preston. I wanted to become me. And apparently that wasn't good enough for you. I wasn't crying. I didn't need to. The years had already wrung the pain out of me, drop by drop. My father's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You were always different. I was never less, I said. There it was. The truth I'd never spoken aloud to them until now. I was never less than Savannah's beauty or Preston's success or your expectations. I was just never what you wanted me to be. My mother looked at me then, really looked. Not at my outfit or my posture or how I held my teacup, but at me. Inslee, her middle child. The daughter she'd buried under monograms and manners and a mold I never fit into. We were wrong, she said. And blinked. I wasn't expecting it. Not from her. We were so wrong, she repeated, her voice trembling. About what mattered. About who you were. About how we treated you. I don't know if we can ever undo what we did, but I want to try. I stared at her, trying to see if there was a performance in her eyes. But there wasn't. Just tired regret. My father nodded slowly. You built this. Without us. Without any of us. And it's extraordinary. He cleared his throat. I was proud of Preston's bar license. And Savannah's wedding. But this. He looked around again. The art. The space. The warmth. This is something no one could have planned for. Not even me. It was the closest I'd ever come to hearing pride in his voice. And strangely, I didn't need it anymore. But it still felt like balm on an old scar. We talked for hours. Not about the past. Not about what was lost. But about now. About my work. The gallery. The mentorships I offered to young artists with no family support. My travels. The Holmes story. Clara Weston and what she saw in me. My mother teared up again when I spoke of Clara. She gave you what we never did. A chance, I said. Belief. She reached across the counter and touched my hand. Just barely. Like she wasn't sure if she had permission anymore. Let her. That evening they left. No drama. No guilt. Just a quiet goodbye. Will you stay in touch? My mother asked before getting into the car. I don't know, I said honestly. But I won't disappear again. And I didn't. Weeks passed. Then months. And for the first time in over a decade, I started getting texts from my mother. Small ones at first. Saw your piece in Elle Decor. Stunning. Do you have a photo of that painting with the girl on the dock? I keep thinking about it. Then one day an envelope arrived. Handwritten. From my father. Inside was a photograph. It was from when I was 15, taken at my first local art fair. I had my hair in a messy braid, wearing overalls with paint smudges on my face. I was holding a ribbon for second place, beaming. Behind me stood my father, looking slightly amused and very out of place in his golf shirt and blazer. The caption on the back said, "You always had it in you. I just didn't see it yet, Dad." Sometimes, reconciliation doesn't come with a grand apology. Sometimes it comes with a memory. Gesture. Photo you didn't know they kept. 2 months had passed since the reunion. Summer had rolled into early fall, and the beach house took on a quieter rhythm. The tourists faded. The light changed, softer somehow, like the sky was exhaling. And I found myself with a calm I hadn't known in years. I was still processing everything that had happened. My parents' stunned expressions, our long kitchen conversation, the letter my father sent me with the old photograph tucked inside. And yet, life didn't stop for clarity. The gallery calendar was packed. My mentorship program had expanded from 2 students to 6, and every Friday afternoon, we gathered in the backyard studio. The old guest house Clara Weston had built and I'd transformed, to paint, sketch, share feedback, and sometimes just sit in silence and work. That studio became something sacred. A small temple of expression, honesty, and chosen family. One Friday, as I set out lemonade and fresh canvases, Nico, one of my most gifted students, turned to me and asked, "Miss Ainsley, were you always this calm?" I laughed, surprised. Calm? You're just solid. Like you're not trying to prove anything to anyone. The words settled in my chest like warm tea. No, I said after a moment. I wasn't always calm. I was angry for a long time. Then I was lonely. And then, finally, I started making things. And somewhere in all that, I became this. He nodded like he understood more than his 21 years should have allowed. I didn't tell him that calm was sometimes a choice I had to make daily. That even now, in the quiet, the echoes of old pain still found their way in. That weekend, I hosted my annual open gallery night, a tradition I'd started 3 years earlier. We opened the beach house to the public, removed the furniture from the main floor, and transformed the space into a walkthrough exhibition. Local collectors came, journalists from design magazines, young artists hoping to see what art looked like outside a white-walled Manhattan gallery, and friends, real friends, the kind I'd chosen and who had chosen me back. As the sun dipped behind the dunes, fairy lights flickered to life, jazz floated through the rooms, and people meandered barefoot through the house with glasses of rose and notebooks full of sketches. I wore a white linen jumpsuit with paint on the hem. Not for fashion. Just because I'd been touching up a canvas earlier that afternoon. No pearls. No performance. Somewhere around 9 p.m., while chatting with a woman from the New York Times style section, I saw Savannah. She stood in the doorway, nervously adjusting the strap on her purse, eyes scanning the crowd like she wasn't sure if she belonged. For a moment I just watched her. She wasn't glowing with southern poise tonight. She wasn't surrounded by friends or children or an adoring husband. She looked a human, like someone who'd been humbled. When her eyes found mine, she didn't smile. She looked like she might turn and run. Instead, I walked over. Didn't expect to see you here, I said gently. She gave a tight nod. I wasn't sure I'd come. I'm glad you did. Pause. I read the article in Hampton's Monthly. The one about you mentoring young artists. Waited. I showed it to Mom, she added. She cried. She's cried a lot lately, I said. It wasn't a jab, just an observation. Savannah looked down, twisting the strap of her purse. I didn't come to explain anything. Or ask for anything. I raised an eyebrow. Then why did you come? She looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. To say, I never stopped missing you. The words weren't perfect, but they were enough. I stepped aside, letting her into the room. She stayed for an hour. Walked through the gallery slowly, touching the corners of each canvas like she needed to feel they were real. When she left, she hugged me, awkwardly, like we were children again, sneaking into our parents' closet to play dress-up. I don't expect things to go back to normal, she whispered. Smiled. Nothing's normal anymore. That's kind of the point. That night, after the guests were gone and the house returned to stillness, I stood alone in the studio. One wall was covered in blank canvas. I stared at it, suddenly compelled to paint something I hadn't dared to. I dipped the brush in midnight blue, then bone white, then ochre. My hands moved without thinking. By sunrise, I had finished the piece. It was a woman, older now, standing on a shore, arms crossed gently over her chest. Her shadow behind her stretched backward into a storm. But ahead of her, the sea was calm. The sky was clear. And in the distant sand, you could just barely make out the figures of others approaching. Hesitant, blurry, but there. Not quite family. Not yet. But maybe someday. The following week, I got a voicemail from my mother. Hi, sweetheart. Me, Ainsley. I saw the article about your scholarship fund. Your father and I would like to contribute if that's appropriate. I understand if you don't want that. Just let me know. I didn't call her back right away. But I didn't delete the message either. Later that month, I hosted my first retreat for women artists. 5 of us, all with stories marked by rejection, rebuilding, and reinvention. We spent 3 days painting, cooking, walking the beach in silence. On the final night, as we sat around the fire pit, one of the women, June, a sculptor from Chicago, asked me something I hadn't been asked before. What did you learn, she said, from losing them? Thought about it. Let the waves answer for a while. Then I said, that survival is not the same as healing. That distance is not always protection. And that sometimes, the family you choose will hold you better than the one you came from. Everyone nodded. No one spoke for a while. Then June smiled. But you let them back in, didn't you? Not all the way, I said. But I left the door unlocked. That fall my niece, the one who'd found the seashell on the beach, sent me a letter. Handwritten. In pink glitter pen. Dear Aunt Ainsley, Mommy said you paint girls who are brave. When I grow up, I want to be one of your paintings. I framed that letter. Hung it beside the first award I ever got for my art. Right below a photograph of me at 15, holding that second-place ribbon with my dad half smiling behind me. We never had a big reconciliation dinner. No grand toast or reunion Christmas. But slowly, gently they started showing up. Birthday text. A photo of my parents at a new exhibit in Charleston. A donation to a youth art center in my name. And maybe that's enough. Not a full family again. But maybe something more honest. Something real. Autumn came like an exhale. The sea outside the house turned a deeper blue, colder, heavier. Fewer people walked the beach. The laughter of summer faded into the hush of falling leaves. And inside my home, I found a rhythm again. Not the kind of rhythm I had when I was rebuilding from rock bottom, or chasing opportunity like it might vanish if I blinked. This rhythm was slower, more intentional, like my breath finally matched my life. And in that stillness, I asked myself a question I hadn't dared ask in years. What do I want now? Not just for my art, or my business, or my carefully curated boundaries, but for me. For the woman who had once walked away from her entire family with $800 and a camera. For the artist who turned a quiet inheritance into a thriving creative sanctuary. For the daughter who had stood in the very doorway her parents thought they'd walk through unnoticed. And the answer came one morning as I watched the waves roll in, notebook in hand, blank page waiting. I wanted peace. Not the kind that comes from avoidance. The kind that feels earned, lived in. And I realized, maybe I was ready, not to forget, but to begin something different. I invited them back. Not for a grand event. Not for a reunion. Just dinner. Small gathering. I cooked myself. Nothing fancy. Roasted squash soup, fresh rosemary focaccia, a beet salad with feta, and the peach cobbler I'd once begged my mother to teach me how to make when I was 13. It came. My mother brought flowers. My father brought a bottle of wine. Savannah brought her oldest daughter, who now wore the same wide-eyed awe I once did when I looked out at the sea. The meal was quiet at first. Tentative. Like no one wanted to step too loudly on the newly mended floor between us. But something shifted when my father asked to help with dishes. I laughed. You never helped with dishes in your own house. I know, he said, smiling faintly. That's probably part of the problem. We stood side by side at the sink, the window above us looking out at the black ocean. My hands were wet, my sleeves rolled, and suddenly, I felt 17 again, still hoping he'd see me. He looked over at me and said, "You built a life that matters. One that's real." And I believed him this time. Later on the porch, my mother and I sat wrapped in knit blankets, mugs of tea in our hands. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "I was scared." Of what? Of what it would mean to love you, without controlling you. That took the breath from my lungs. I thought love meant shaping you into someone safe. Someone digestible. For the world we came from. I didn't understand that letting you be fully you would have given me more of you. Not less. Tears pricked at my eyes. But I didn't let them fall. I didn't need to anymore. She looked out over the dunes. "Do you think there's still time to know you?" I looked at her, truly looked, and saw not the cold woman from my childhood or the critic from my graduation dinner, but just a mother, finally learning how to ask for access instead of assuming it was her right. "There's always time," I said softly. "But you have to walk. Not expect me to meet you halfway every time." She nodded. "Then I'll walk." In the weeks that followed, our relationship didn't magically fix itself, but they started calling. Not just for holidays. For no reason at all. "Tell me what you're painting this week," my mother would ask. "Did you see the new gallery opening in Soho?" My dad once texted. "Reminded me of that piece you showed me at the house. They even invited me to Thanksgiving." I didn't go. Not that year. But I sent a painting. Small one. Of a long dinner table by the sea. With one chair turned slightly toward the viewer. It was my way of saying, "I'm not coming. But I'm not gone." Instead, I spent Thanksgiving with the people who had shown up in my darkest hours. Nico and June and my other students came by. We cooked potluck style. Laughed until someone spilled sweet potato casserole on my studio rug. Took Polaroids and hung them on twine in the hallway. At one point, June looked around and said, "This feels like family." And I realized, it was, maybe not by blood, but by bond, by choice, by every hand that held me up when I was ready to fall apart. Winter in the Hamptons is a quiet thing. Tourists vanish. The ocean churns with a fury it doesn't show in July. The nights stretch long and still. It was during one of those nights that I stood in the gallery room and looked at all my work from the past 10 years. The girl on the dock. The faceless dancer. The wind-battered woman looking toward the sea. And finally, a new canvas. My most recent piece. It was a family. Not holding hands. Not perfectly posed. But present. Each figure facing a different direction. Some blurred. Some incomplete. But together. In one frame. I called it reclamation. In spring I started teaching again. Not just mentoring but standing in front of classrooms at the local arts college. sharing not just technique but the raw truth of what it means to be rejected and still create. One student asked me during office hours, "Do you regret it? Losing so much, I mean." I thought about my parents, the silence, the years I spent without birthday calls or Christmas mornings. And then I thought about this house. You see, the students who had become like siblings, the letters, the gallery shows, the childlike joy I felt every time someone saw themselves in something I painted. "No," I said. "I didn't lose anything. I gave myself the space to find something better." Eventually, my parents asked if they could visit again. Just them. No fanfare. They came for a weekend in June. We didn't talk about the past much, but we did walk the beach. They watched me photograph waves at golden hour. And one night, over grilled salmon and lemon risotto, my father raised a toast. "To Ainsley," he said, "who taught us that family isn't who you expect, it's who you see. And more importantly, who you believe in." We clinked glasses. And this time I toasted too. The story didn't end with revenge. It didn't end with slamming doors or dramatic exits. It ended with something better. Reclamation. Of my story. Of my power. Of a home no one could take from me again. And if you're watching this and wondering if healing is worth the effort, if it's too late to be seen or heard or loved, let me tell you, it isn't. Thank you for watching.